October 1986, Harborview, California. 11:36 p.m. Alarms hit the night. A warehouse on the waterfront is burning. Station 12 rolls first. Inside the cab, Lieutenant John Jack Miller checks his gear. 11 years on the job. Tonight, smoke pushes low and heavy from the utility level, not the office where the flames show. That detail matters. At 12:02 a.m., Jack keys his radio. He reports the hum of an industrial fan and a sharp chemical smell. He says he's going down the service stairs to the lower corridor. The transmission cuts. No static. No follow-up. 14 minutes later, the captain orders a retreat over fears of a Halon discharge. Head count on the apron comes up one short. Jack is missing. Crews sweep the perimeter. Near a locked west door, they find a soot-blackened glove and a scorched name tag. No helmet, no radio, no sign of a fall. By morning, headlines call it what it looks like: a disappearance inside a burning maze. But the fire scene won't behave. A fresh cylinder lock shows pry marks. The Halon system's manual release knob bears a bright scratch. Wipe tests from the utility floor register toluene and MEK. Solvents, not a simple electrical short. A security guard's Polaroid taken at 11:20 p.m. shows a white Ford F-150 nosed up to that west door, plate washed out by glare. A trucker says he watched two men carry small drums toward the same entrance minutes before the first siren. Jack's gray folder, notes on late-night chemical alarms around the port, has vanished from his locker. Rumors rush in to fill the gap. A custody battle, a bar owner with a temper, debts. The case cools. The questions don't. 5 years pass. Renovation crews crack the slab and find a sealed utility pocket. Inside lies the first clear discovery since that night. Personal gear that wasn't logged missing, skeletal remains with plastic tie impressions, and paperwork stamped with a city inspector's name that shouldn't be there. Phone records surface. Payments move through a waste contractor's account. The cold case warms fast. How did a firefighter vanish in 14 minutes? Who opened a locked door, and why did a Halon system matter? Follow the timeline, the witness statements, and the lab results. The answers pull this story out of smoke and into daylight. October 1986. Harborview, a busy port city in Los Angeles County. The waterfront never truly slept. Cranes lined the docks, ships idled offshore, and container yards glowed under harsh sodium lights. That night the air was cool and dry, the kind of weather where a single spark could spread fast. At 11:36 p.m., alarms inside the Harborline Logistics warehouse screamed. Flames had been spotted in the upper office wing, and black smoke was already pushing out through vents along the east wall. Within minutes, 911 calls flooded dispatch. People nearby described thick smoke rolling across the wharf, dark enough to block the lights above the pier. Station 12 was first out. Their trucks roared down Harborview Boulevard and cut straight toward the warehouse district. In command of the first engine was Lieutenant John Jack Miller. He was 33 years old, with more than a decade on the job. Colleagues knew him as steady, watchful, the kind of firefighter who noticed details others ignored. He'd handled chemical blazes, dockside accidents, and rescue calls in some of the toughest corners of the port. The team arrived in under 3 minutes. Flames licked through the office windows on the second floor, but something didn't add up. The heaviest smoke wasn't rising from the fire above. It was forcing its way out from the underground maintenance wing, the sealed utility area that housed electrical switchgear and refrigeration equipment. Jack immediately saw the difference. A routine office fire shouldn't send out smoke that dark, that thick from a sublevel. He split his crew. One team attacked the visible fire upstairs. Jack led a smaller group toward the service corridors that dropped into the basement. As they advanced, the air grew hotter, the odor sharper. Not the ordinary bite of burning wood or wiring. This was chemical, harsh enough to sting the throat. Emergency lights flickered, painting the narrow halls in red and white pulses. Visibility fell to almost nothing. At 12:02 a.m., Jack's voice came across the radio. Smell of chemicals, hearing industrial fans, heading down to check the sub-basement. It was clear and firm, then silence. The transmission cut off without warning. Object tried to raise him. No response. Seconds passed, then minutes. Meanwhile, command was getting fresh warnings. The building housed Halon 1301 suppression tanks, systems capable of flooding sealed spaces with gas. If a line ruptured, the result would be catastrophic. At 12:16 a.m., the order was given. Pull back. Crews were told to evacuate before the roof or suppression lines gave way. Back at the muster point, they counted heads. One was missing, Jack. Instantly, a search detail ran back inside, pushing through smoke near the western service door. They didn't find him. What they did find was strange. A single glove, blackened with soot, lying near the utility entrance. A few feet away, Jack's nameplate badge, bent and scorched, half buried in debris. His radio was gone. His body was nowhere. The time frame was devastatingly narrow. 14 minutes separated his last call from the moment the evacuation sounded. 14 minutes in which a veteran firefighter, inside a building packed with his own crew, had vanished without explanation. When dawn broke, the fire was out, but the mystery was only beginning. Reporters crowded the police tape, demanding answers. The Harborview Daily Times carried.
If this story already has you wondering what happened in those missing 14 minutes, make sure to hit like so more people can discover it, and subscribe to follow every new chapter. In Part 2, we'll step away from the fire and look at who Jack Miller really was. The firefighter behind the uniform, the pressures in his private life, and the secrets he kept in a gray folder that may explain why he vanished. What do you think happened inside that warehouse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. John Jack Miller was 33 years old in the fall of 1986. He had spent more than a decade in uniform at Fire Station 12 in Harborview, Los Angeles County. 11 years of alarms, sirens, and smoke. He had answered more than 200 calls. 4 years earlier, he had been decorated for pulling 2 dock workers out of a sealed container filled with smoke. Among his crew, Jack was known as calm under pressure, the man who kept his head when flames were closing in. They described him as disciplined, observant, and the type who noticed the small things others ignored. Outside the firehouse, Jack lived a quieter, ordinary life. On weekends, he often took his 5-year-old son, Ethan, to the ballpark. Neighbors remembered him as reserved, not the kind to start long conversations, but the first to lend a hand fixing a fuse or clearing debris. He always carried a photo of Ethan in his wallet, a constant reminder of the only thing that mattered more to him than the job. But behind the image of a steady firefighter was a man under strain. 4 months before the night at Harborline Logistics, his marriage to Jennifer Davis had ended. The divorce had left open wounds and a bitter custody battle. Who would raise Ethan? Who could provide the stable home? Their arguments spilled out in public, including a loud exchange at a baseball field just days before the fire. The tension between them was no secret. Money only made things worse. Jack carried credit card debt and a small personal loan after the divorce.
To keep up, he picked up extra night shifts, stretching himself thin. The suspicion troubled him deeply. More than once he confided to a colleague, "Someone is using fire to clear the trail of dirty chemicals." He was certain it wasn't random, that it was organized. And just before he disappeared, the gray folder was gone from his locker. Over the summer and into the fall, Jack made at least 4 official reports about chemical odors at the port. Each one was logged internally as technical malfunction. He began to believe his warnings were being ignored, maybe even buried. That loss of trust weighed on him. After the divorce, Jack rented a small apartment near the harbor. Napars remembered the glow of his light late at night. He spent hours writing notes, making phone calls, trying to piece something together. Yet every weekend he stuck to his routine, picking up Ethan, watching ball games, driving him back before bedtime. To his family, those visits proved he would never run away. His parents and sister insisted that whatever happened later, Jack would never abandon his son. "If Jack vanished," his sister said, "it means someone wanted him silenced." Investigators looked at his private life first. They saw the custody battle. They saw the debt. They decided these were motives for disappearance. Maybe Jack cracked under the weight. Maybe he walked away. But his family and his closest colleagues dismissed that idea immediately. They argued it was nonsense. They pointed instead to the missing gray folder and his words about fires being used to erase evidence. Jack's story was not just about a firefighter lost in a blaze. It was about a man who was circling something dangerous, who may have seen too much. He carried secrets in that folder, and those secrets vanished with him. In the weeks after the fire, those who knew him best were forced to watch as rumors grew. Some whispered that Jack had staged his disappearance to escape debt. Others said the custody fight drove him to run. His family rejected all of it. To them, the only truth was that Jack had walked into the Harborline warehouse as a firefighter doing his duty, and he never walked out. The picture of Jack that emerged was complicated. Jennifer Davis was 31 years old in the fall of 1986. She worked as a nurse at Harborview Community Hospital. Just 4 months earlier, she had finalized a divorce from Lieutenant John Jack Miller, the firefighter who had vanished during the Harborline warehouse blaze. Their relationship had ended bitterly, with a custody battle over their 5-year-old son, Ethan, still unresolved. In the eyes of investigators, that background alone was enough to draw suspicion. Tension between Jack and Jennifer was no secret. They had argued publicly about money, child support, and custody schedules. Neighbors recalled seeing them shouting at each other at a local baseball field just 3 days before the fire. For detectives under pressure to find answers quickly, those details painted a picture that was hard to ignore. On the night of the blaze, Jennifer was assigned to an evening shift at the hospital. Records confirmed she was on duty, but her time card revealed a troubling gap. Roughly 20 minutes unaccounted for during a routine shift change. No one saw her during that window. To investigators, that meant opportunity. They believed those missing minutes could have allowed her to leave the hospital, drive to the port, and return without drawing attention. A search of Jennifer's home only added fuel to speculation. Appalachia discovered an expired access card for the Harborview docks. The card had belonged to her younger brother, who had once worked at the port but left years earlier. Detectives considered whether Jennifer could have used the badge to enter the area on the night of the fire. Even though the card was expired, the find was enough to push investigators toward a working theory. The theory was simple. Jennifer wanted Jack out of the picture, By eliminating him, she could remove the biggest obstacle in her custody battle and free herself from financial strain. That motive, coupled with the unexplained 20 minutes and the expired dock pass, was enough to make her the first official suspect. Local newspapers wasted no time amplifying the story. Headlines framed her as the jealous ex-wife. Television broadcasts repeated the idea until it stuck in the minds of the public. Jennifer, meanwhile, insisted she had nothing to hide. She told investigators she had been at the hospital all night, leaving her post briefly only to switch.
Detectives kept returning to the same point, the 20-minute gap. They argued it was enough time to slip away, reach the warehouse, and play a role in what happened to Jack. Yet there was no evidence to support that theory beyond circumstance. No one had seen her near the docks, no forensic evidence connected her to the scene. There were no fingerprints, no hair samples, no fabric traces, nothing. Still, the lack of evidence did not stop the weight of rumor. Within weeks, Jennifer became a pariah in her own community. At the hospital, colleagues kept their distance. In her neighborhood, some neighbors crossed the street rather than speak to her. The cruelest blow came when Ethan, just 5 years old, was taunted by classmates who whispered that his mother had made his father disappear. For Jennifer's family, it was unbearable. They stood by her, insisting she had been falsely accused, but the drumbeat of gossip never stopped. Her parents and siblings launched letters to the editor and even petitioned the police to clear her name, but officials remained silent. To them, Jennifer remained the most logical suspect, even if the evidence was thin. The case file reflected the imbalance. Pages of notes cataloged arguments between Jack and Jennifer, financial disputes, and emotional testimony from neighbors. But when it came to hard evidence, fingerprints, footprints, chemical residues, the pages were empty. Investigators leaned heavily on motive, even when the trail led nowhere. Jennifer's image in the public eye hardened. The local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Was it the ex-wife?" The framing was enough to cement her role in the public imagination. Whether guilty or not, Jennifer Davis became synonymous with suspicion. Friction almost would men mentioned in Harborview, people lowered their voices and exchanged knowing looks. What the public did not know, and what investigators overlooked, was that the fire itself carried far more suspicious markers than any family dispute. Chemical residues, tampered safety equipment, and eyewitness accounts pointed to something larger, something organized. But those threads were left to gather dust while attention focused squarely on the nurse who had once been married to Jack Miller. By the time weeks had passed, Jennifer's life was in ruins. She was never charged, but she lived under a shadow heavier than any conviction. Harborview had already judged her. The ex-wife theory became. Mike Thompson was 35 years old in 1986. He owned a small bar a few blocks from the Harborview docks. Regulars knew him as a man with a quick temper. Fights broke out in his place more often than anyone wanted to admit. Police had been called before, but he had never faced serious charges. In the eyes of Harborview, Thompson was trouble, but not yet a criminal. That reputation would make him an easy target once suspicion turned his way. His history with Jack Miller went back at least a year. In 1985, Jack had stepped in during a violent brawl outside the bar. Witnesses said Thompson never forgave him. The two exchanged heated words more than once in public. For investigators desperate for a lead, that feud looked like motive. If Jack had embarrassed Thompson, maybe Thompson wanted revenge. Then came the truck. Thompson drove a white Ford F-150, a 1985 model. It matched the vehicle captured in a Polaroid by the warehouse guard on the night of the fire. The picture showed a white pickup parked near the West Service door at 11:20 p.m. The truck had no front plate. Thompson's Ford often ran the same way. For detectives, the connection seemed impossible to ignore. Evidence piled on quickly. A gas station attendant recalled selling paint thinner and solvent to Thompson that same night.
Investigators searched his home and found a jacket that carried a faint chemical smell. Tests showed traces of solvent, but not strong enough to link it directly to the fire. They found no drums, no rags, no containers. Still, suspicion deepened.
Thompson claimed he had been in his bar until 1 a.m. He pointed to his cash register logs to back him up. But when police looked closer, they saw gaps. Between 11:50 p.m. and 12:15 a.m., there were no recorded sales. That was the exact window in which Jack vanished inside the burning warehouse. Detectives argued Thompson could have left, driven to the docks, and returned before anyone noticed. The missing entries became a central piece of their case. The pressure mounted fast. Harborview police publicly labeled Thompson a person of interest. The local paper ran stories comparing Jack's clean record with Thompson's brawls. Rumors spread that he had been seen circling the docks, though no one could name a witness. The community, already shaken by Jack's disappearance, found it easy to believe the worst. Yet, when the evidence was laid out, it was thin. No one saw Thompson near the warehouse that night. Patrons at his bar remembered him being around, though they disagreed on the exact times. No forensic link tied him to Jack's gear or the site. His truck, while suspicious, was a common model in Harborview. The solvent purchase could just as easily have been for bar maintenance, as he claimed. Everything was circumstantial. Still, the weight of suspicion changed his life. Customers stopped coming. Old friends distanced themselves. He was shunned in public. For years, Thompson carried the label of the second suspect, a man many believed had lured Jack to his death. He sold off equipment, then parts of the bar itself, trying to stay afloat. He repeated the same defense every time reporters came knocking. "I didn't do this. I never had anything to do with that fire." Investigators pressed him again and again. Why did his alibi have holes? Why did he buy solvent that night? Why did his truck look like the one in the photo? He answered each point, but with explanations that never satisfied. The gaps remained. The police could not close the case, and Harborview refused to forget. But facts mattered. There was no DNA, no fingerprints, no clear line from Thompson to the underground chamber where Jack's remains would later be found. Forensic teams came up empty inside his bar and his truck. The case against him was one of anger, opportunity, and coincidence. It was never proof. Still, like Jennifer Davis, Thompson was convicted in the court of public opinion. The narrative of a jealous ex-wife and a violent bar owner gave Harborview something simple to hold on to. But in clinging to that story, investigators missed the real trail. The chemical residues, the tampered Halon system, the forged safety logs. By the time the case went cold, Thompson had lost almost everything. His reputation was destroyed, his business nearly gone. He would live under suspicion for years, until new evidence finally pointed the investigation elsewhere. Both Jennifer and Thompson carried the weight of false suspicion. Neither had the evidence to clear their names quickly. And while the focus stayed fixed on them, the true conspirators moved freely. The mistakes of those years would come back to haunt Harborview. Because the deeper investigators dug into Thompson, the further they strayed from the real crime scene. The van, the chemicals, the hidden chamber, all of it lay waiting, ignored. The disappearance of Lieutenant John Jack Miller should have been a case built on evidence. Instead, it became a story built on a... The same happened with the chemical traces. Samples taken from the concrete floor of the lower level tested positive for toluene and methyl ethyl ketone, solvents tied to industrial dumping and fires
that spread unnaturally fast. Yet investigators dismissed them as not significant. The results never made it to the public. Jack's family, convinced his notes about chemical dumping were tied to the fire, were left powerless. They couldn't even see the lab reports that confirmed his suspicions. Even the Polaroid taken by the security guard went nowhere. The photo clearly showed a white Ford F-150 parked near the side entrance minutes before the alarm. Instead of tracing nearby traffic cameras or searching for the truck that night, detectives labeled the image unclear. The only result was that Mike Thompson, a local bar owner who drove the same model, became the focus. Then, there was the missing gray binder. Jack had carried it for months, filling it with notes about strange chemical odors and suspicious calls near the docks. After he disappeared, it vanished too. His colleagues remembered him writing in it nightly, but investigators brushed off the missing binder as irrelevant. In the official record, Jack's work was reduced to a personal obsession. Gossip spread that he invented the chemical fires to cover his own troubles. While evidence faded, others benefited. Harborline Logistics, the company running the warehouse, reported that shipping records had been destroyed in the blaze. Days later, they filed a massive insurance claim. The insurer flagged it as suspicious, even suggested possible fraud. Yet the police never dug deeper into the financial angle. The focus stayed on Jack's family, his debts, and his former wife. Compounding the failures, the case changed hands 3 times. Each time, new investigators added their own interpretations, dropping pieces of what came before. The file grew thicker, but the direction of the investigation collapsed. In the end, no one had a full picture of what really happened. For the Miller family, it was a second tragedy. Letters pleading for a deeper review went unanswered. Jack's sister went to the local press, arguing that the police had ignored chemical evidence. Officials dismissed her statements as emotional, not factual. Ethan, Jack's son,
Jennifer Davis and Mike Thompson carried their own burdens. Jennifer was labeled the jealous ex-wife. Thompson was branded the hot-headed bar owner who wanted revenge. Neither had evidence against them, but both lived as suspects in the eyes of the town. They were treated as guilty in conversation long before any courtroom could speak. The longer the case sat cold, the more Jack's image was reshaped. The man who had once been honored for saving 2 dock workers became the man people said had run from his child. The narrative of failure overshadowed the truth of his disappearance. By the end of the decade, the file was closed. Harborview moved on, or tried to. The case had become a whisper, an unresolved story kept alive by rumor. But fate has a way of exposing what was buried. In 1991, when construction crews dug into the old warehouse floor, they found a sealed cavity. Inside lay evidence no one had expected. Evidence that would rip the case open after 5 years of silence. In 1991, 5 years after the Harborline warehouse fire, the case of Lieutenant John Jack Miller was no more than a fading headline. Official files were closed, rumors filled the silence, and the city of Harborview moved on. That changed when the old warehouse was sold and prepared for conversion into a modern distribution hub. Construction crews arrived, breaking up the concrete floor of the basement level. At first it was routine work. Then, under a layer of poured cement, they hit something that wasn't on the blueprints. A sealed cavity, tucked away in a forgotten corner. When the concrete gave way, the workers found a hidden space no one had mapped, a small maintenance chamber. The air that escaped carried the stale smell of chemicals, sharp and acrid, even after half a decade. Inside, they found more than anyone expected. Lying in the dust was a firefighter's helmet. The serial number didn't match any of the gear officially listed as missing in 1986. Nearby were fragments of human remains, pieces of rib cage, a wrist bone. And on that bone, clear grooves where plastic ties had once cut into the skin. But the hidden chamber held more than bones. Stuffed into the corner was a folded inspection certificate. The document carried the signature of Thomas Anderson, a city safety inspector. On its face, it certified the chemical systems of the Harborline warehouse as safe. Forensic review determined the form had been falsified. Anderson's signature was real. The purpose was not. It was paperwork meant to cover up hazardous material violations, and it had been buried alongside a dead firefighter. Investigators dug deeper. Old telephone logs from a public booth near the docks were pulled. 2 calls had been made between 11:50 p.m. and 12:20 a.m. on the night Jack disappeared. Both were placed to Anderson's personal number. The timing was exact. The calls lined up with the 14 minutes Jack was last heard alive inside the warehouse basement. Bank records added another layer. In the weeks after the fire, Anderson received a large wire transfer. The money came from Harborview Waste Services, a company long rumored to dump solvents and industrial waste under cover of night. For years, no one had connected them to the blaze. Now the money trail tied them directly to an official charged with safety oversight. Attention then turned back to the fire department itself. A review of duty logs revealed alterations in the report from that night. The edits were traced to William Johnson, the acting commander during the response. Sections were crossed out, timings adjusted, entries rewritten. Patterns showed Johnson had been present at multiple suspicious alarms in 1986, many linked to strange odors around the port. What once looked like coincidence now looked like a pattern of concealment. By early 1992, the Harborview Police Department could no longer treat the fire as an unsolved disappearance. The chief announced the reopening of the Jack Miller case. This time, the investigation moved away from rumors about divorce, debt, or a jealous ex-wife. The new focus was organized misconduct tied to chemicals, bribes, and a possible cover-up inside city ranks. Jennifer Davis, Jack's ex-wife, who had lived for years under suspicion, was quietly dropped from the case file. So was Mike Thompson. For Harborview, it was more than scandal. It was betrayal. The public realized that while police chased rumors about a bitter ex-wife or a hot-tempered bar owner, the real trail of evidence had been left untouched beneath their feet. The scratches on the Halon valve, the solvents on the floor, the missing file Jack had kept. All ignored while those truly responsible went free. For Jack's family, the discovery was both relief and heartbreak. His parents wept when they received confirmation their son's remains had been found. His younger sister told reporters that the city had spent 5 years protecting its reputation instead of protecting the truth. And his son Ethan, now 10 years old, learned that his father had not abandoned him, but died in the line of duty. The revelation reignited anger. Citizens demanded accountability not just for the killers, but for every failure that had allowed them to escape justice for so long. Questions about corruption, negligence, and cover-ups swirled around City Hall and the fire department. The reopened case now had momentum. Anderson's forged documents, the suspicious phone calls, the unexplained money transfers, and Johnson's edited duty logs formed a chain of evidence too strong to ignore. The names that had once been whispered in private were suddenly printed in bold on front pages. The cold case was no longer cold.
After 5 years of silence, Jack Miller's death was finally recognized for what it was: a crime. And this set the stage for the final act. In Part 8, the full reconstruction of that October night will emerge. How Jack stumbled upon a crime in progress, who moved to silence him, and how the truth long buried was finally forced into the open. In 1992, investigators rebuilt the timeline of the fire minute by minute. From the first alarm at 23:36 to Jack's final radio call at midnight and 2, and the silence that followed. What they uncovered changed everything. Evidence showed that Jack entered the sublevel just as his acting commander, William Johnson, and an inspector named Thomas Anderson were inside. They were not there to fight fire. They were there to cover one. Johnson and Anderson had begun releasing Halon gas, and the trail of proof was undeniable. Jack's remains told part of the story: bones bearing the marks of restraint, lungs damaged by Halon. The forged chemical inspection report told another. It carried Anderson's signature. The call records placed 2 phone calls to Anderson's private number between 0002 and 00016, the very window of Jack's disappearance. Financial documents added the final link. Anderson received a large transfer from Harborview Waste Services, a company already suspected of dumping toxic solvents near the docks. Then came Johnson's altered duty log. His changes erased the exact stretch of time when Jack vanished. The Polaroid of the white Ford F-150 matched witness testimony of men moving barrels into the warehouse that same night. Piece by piece, the story locked into place. By 1993, the case reached court. The trial filled the Harborview courthouse. For Jack's family, it was a bitter return. 7 years waiting for answers, and the truth was worse than rumor. Johnson, once their son's superior, stood accused of betraying his own firefighter. Anderson, the city's safety inspector, sat beside him as an accomplice. The prosecution laid out every thread: the body, the chemical traces, the forged inspection slip, the calls, the money, the altered logs, and the witness who saw the barrels. The courtroom listened in silence. The defense fought back. Johnson claimed he acted to protect the honor of the department. Anderson insisted his signature had been forged, but the evidence spoke louder. No jury could ignore the chain: the gas, the lies, the payoff, the cover-up. The verdict came down hard. William Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Thomas Anderson was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. He received 25 years in prison. For the first time, the names of Jennifer Davis and Mike Thompson were cleared. The court declared they had been wrongly shadowed by suspicion. Both walked away without charges, but their reputations had been scarred for years. For Jennifer, the ruling meant she... At the waterfront, Harborview built a memorial to Jack Miller. Every year, firefighters and residents gathered to remember him. The ceremony doubled as a community drill for chemical safety, so no one would ever forget what had happened in that hidden chamber. A hotline was created for anonymous tips about suspicious fires or illegal dumping. Reports surged, and accidents declined through the 1990s. Out of tragedy came prevention. For Jack's family, the final chapter carried both pain and pride. His parents and sister finally heard a judge recognize his death as duty, not desertion. His son Ethan, now 10, was told clearly that his father had died a firefighter, not a runaway. The family received his posthumous Medal of Valor. They carried it home not as compensation, but as proof that the truth had survived. Even for Harborview itself, the case was transformative. What began as a bitter fight between rumor and fact ended with a community more cautious, more united, and less willing to accept easy answers. The vanishing firefighter became more than a local tragedy. It became a warning carved into the city's identity. Evidence must always come before assumption. This was the end of the case, but not the end of its impact. Families changed. Institutions reformed. Society learned, however late, that ignoring the obvious can cost lives, and that silence, if left unchecked, protects only the guilty. Jack's story closed in court, but its lessons stayed alive in Harborview. If this case left you questioning the cost of truth, don't let the discussion end here. Share your thoughts, leave a comment, and let me know. What part of this story shocked you most? And make sure you're subscribed, because the next case we uncover will show how another cold trail was brought back to life.